Awesome.
Okay, welcome everybody. I am so excited to introduce today. We have Martha Florence, who is a registered nurse practitioner, and she is going to be speaking with us today about chronic illness. My name is Deanna Gutierrez. For those of you who don't know me, I am a doTERRA Diamond Wellness Advocate, and we are having this really special interview today to delve into some of the chronic illness discussion and thyroid support using natural solutions and her personal journey really through this whole experience and all the information that she can offer to share with us from both sides of the spectrum. So I'm really excited to delve into this with you today. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Awesome. So give us a little bit of background about yourself, a little bit about your story, what you've come from.
Yeah, so I am a family nurse practitioner. My background is in women's health and functional medicine. So I practice a more functional medicine approach, which I can talk about if people don't know what that is. But I spent 5 years working as a registered nurse in labor and delivery before I went to nurse practitioner school. And kind of as I was at the end of my time in labor and delivery, I started to have a lot of fatigue and just some weird health symptoms. And I went to my doctor, and at one point I even gained like 10 pounds in 2 weeks, which is kind of a lot. And so I went to my doctor for something else, and I was talking to her about this, and she was kind of like, well, yeah, you're fine. We'll get some lab work. You're probably fine. Um, Maybe you should write down what you eat so that you don't gain more weight. And I was like, that's not helpful. Like, I'm an athlete. I spend a lot of time being active. Like, do you know how hard it would be for me to eat that many calories to gain that much weight that quickly? Like, I just don't think that that's the issue. And she was like, oh, it's fine. I was like, I don't know about this. So fortunately, I had another doctor that I had a very good relationship with who did some lab work for me. She believed what I was saying. She did say, your labs are fine, but I believe you. So like, let's dive into this deeper. So she referred me to another doctor who kind of had a couple of thoughts and then referred me to somebody else. And it just turned into this really ugly cycle of me getting passed around from healthcare provider to healthcare provider. And as a healthcare practitioner myself, I was like, this isn't right. I was starting to feel like I was making things up, and maybe I wasn't sick, or maybe there wasn't anything wrong with me and I just needed to sleep more. Granted, I was sleeping, 10 or 12 hours a night and waking, hardly being able to get out of bed in the morning. I'd go for a 3 mile run and, barely be able to crawl up the stairs to the couch to take a 2 hour nap afterwards, which was just not normal for me. And everybody kept telling me I was fine, I was fine. And I thought, well, maybe this is just how life is, which it's not. Spoiler alert, that's not how it's supposed to be.
Yep.
Um, so I finally got an answer from a really smart nurse practitioner that I saw, and I'm telling her my story, and she's like, I think you have mono. And I thought, that's such a simple solution. Why didn't anybody else think of this? So she did the lab work, and it turned out that I had called a reactivated mono infection. So mononucleosis that's a typical disease in younger kids. So I probably had it as a kid, caused by the Epstein-Barr virus, and that virus never leaves your system and it can be reactivated. So stress or something caused this virus to be reactivated and cause a new infection to happen. And you can tell all of that from lab work. So that was great. I had my answer. Throughout this whole process, I was actually like really, really hoping that someone would find a thyroid issue, because I was like, that's fixable. Like, you can take a pill for that. That's fixable. I can feel better. But unfortunately, that's not the answer I got. So I got an answer, but what I didn't get was a plan to feel better. Like, I had this thing, and she's like, oh, well, yeah, there's really nothing you can do about it except for, kind of wait it out. And I was like, well, that's not going to work for me. So I did a lot of research and spent a lot of time trying to figure out how to feel better, because that was all I wanted, was to feel better, right? Like, that's all any of us want, is to feel good and be able to do what we love to do. So it has taken me, I mean, that was in 2014, 2018 now. So 4 years of just, I'm still working on it, but I've learned so much and kind of been able to dig myself out of this hole to a point where I now know what I need to do to feel good. And I know when I'm going to do something on purpose that's going to make me feel bad, how to come out of that. Like I said, I'm an athlete, so sometimes I, do too much and I get really tired, but I now know how to overcome that. And it was kind of when I did that, I was in nurse practitioner school at that time, and I vowed, I thought, if I can help it, like I'm never going to let any of my patients feel like this, because this is awful to just feel like all of this is in your head and you know, have no idea if you're making this up or not. You start to feel crazy. And I just thought like it needs to become my mission to help other people through these kinds of things. And that's how I got to where I am now.
And thank goodness. And thank you for having a voice and having the courage to share it, because you are not alone. In fact, I already have somebody in mind right now that I'm thinking of who has been suffering from symptoms and has spent thousands of dollars trying things and hasn't been able to get to the bottom of what the issue is. And you know what? We haven't even considered looking at mono or doing some of that testing. So I'm excited
Right.
even just, for this information. It
Yeah.
does make a difference and people need to hear it. And when you're suffering and you're not getting answers like that, how frustrating to know that you can feel better. You should be able to feel better.
Right.
You have no idea where to start. Um, so what would you say are some of the common causes of fatigue and low energy? I know you talked about specifically having the Epstein Barr yourself,
Hmm.
but now that you've been practicing with people and looking at some of these things, some people may just have that symptom and not know, what are some things they could look at?
Exactly. Yeah. So, it can be really intimidating to try to go to your healthcare provider and be like, I'm just tired all the time, right? Like I hear that all the time, and it's hard for people to sometimes you just don't feel good and you can't really talk about why. But other than fatigue is kind of like the common thread throughout all of these things. So
Mhm.
it really boils down to, so as a functional medicine practitioner, my goal is to find what's called the root cause. So I want to know what's
Yeah.
causing these symptoms. I don't want to mask them. In some cases, medication is necessary, but I want to know what's actually causing it, because those are the things that we can fix. Um, so it kind of boils down to a few really common causes. And the first one is, and every time I tell somebody this, the look on their face is priceless: not eating enough. Most people don't eat enough. We live in a society where we're told to eat less if we want to lose weight. We're in the United States, we're getting more and more overweight, and we're told to eat less and exercise more. But the reality of the situation is that most of us are not eating enough. Whether that's not enough carbohydrate, because keto is all the rage right now, which great for some people, really doesn't work for a lot of people. Or protein, not enough protein. I don't think anybody eats enough protein. Or just not enough calories in general. So if you're not eating 1,200 calories, everybody's like, I'm eating at least, I'm eating 1,200 calories and I'm not losing weight. 1,200 calories is the recommended daily intake for a 6-year-old. Like, as a grown woman, you're not 6 years old. So you need to eat more than that. I'm
I'm so
like,
happy you're saying all this, because I actually, when I was younger, I worked in a weight loss clinic for a bit.
mhm,
Um, but their methodology was more about teaching you how to eat whole foods and get away from packaged foods. But the amounts people were eating was more than they were used to. And it was an interesting surprise for a lot of people, and learning that there are healthy fats that you do need for your body to
yep,
function well, and that when you're in this starvation mode, your body is going to store fat because it thinks it doesn't know when it's going to get food again. So I'm 100%
exactly.
on board with you and so excited to hear you talk about this.
Yeah, I
Continue.
have patients who I have patients who come to me and they're like, I know I need to lose weight, but I can't. And I always ask them what they're eating. And probably 99.9% of the time, it's not enough. And I'm pretty good. Like, I don't believe in calorie counting as a practice because I just don't think it's helpful, but I do believe in checking in every once in a while. Usually I'm pretty good at estimating, so they'll tell me what they're eating and I'm like, you're barely eating 1,200 calories. Like, that's not enough. I'm
Right.
5'6". I weigh about 150 pounds, and my basal metabolic rate, so that's the absolute minimum number of calories that my body needs to just be, whether, if I'm laying on the couch all day and not moving a muscle, is
Mhm.
1,800 calories. So if you're eating 1,200 calories and your basal metabolic rate is around 1,800 calories, like you can't even sustain normal physiologic function on that amount. So add any sort of activity on top of that, and you've got yourself a problem, because you need to feed the cells that you have in your body for them to do the things they need to do. So eat more. I can almost guarantee you that nobody's eating enough. And
Love.
definitely food quality does matter. At a certain point, eating 1,800 calories is 1,800 calories. And if you haven't been eating 1,800 calories, you need, certainly eating calories is better than not eating calories, but food quality does make a difference. Nutrient dense food, and I'll talk about that why in just a minute. So that's the first big one. And that's the one that like people just, they're like, what do you mean I need to eat more to lose weight? I have yet to have it backfire on me. And I bet
Mm-hmm.
working in a clinic like that, you can probably attest to the same thing. Like
Oh my gosh,
people are like, what do you mean I have to eat more? I want to lose weight.
it was incredible because people were struggling on different diets for years, doing different things, and they came in and we're telling them to, like, eat this amount for your body weight for this and this. Um, and they were like, it was hard for me to finish the meal because they just weren't used to it. And then they were losing weight for the first time in so long.
Yeah.
And it was incredible to see that shift take place for them and the big aha moments and just how backward some of our thoughts are about food and weight loss and some of the marketing that we've been trained on,
Yeah.
to think that fat equals fat. I think is kind of the mentality of it, where it's like, no, it actually means your bowel system works and your brain is healthy and your joints
Right.
function. Like, it actually,
Yeah.
I mean, and again, there's good and bad to all things, and there's information about that. But I'm excited. So just so everybody knows, at the end of this interview, we are going to have answers and some resources to some of the tips that you have, including this is one big one of eating more food can help you feel less tired. I know there's been amazing studies recently too about the importance of sleep and how we're actually going through our days drunk and, well, not drunk, but as if we were
Yeah.
in that
Yeah.
state because we're not able to function properly. And um, we think that we can get more done, by sleeping less hours in the day when really honoring our sleep and honoring our food and making that a priority lets us show up more fully, more focused to get more done in less time
Yeah.
so that we're more effective and functional in that way. And anyways, that's a huge one. I love that. I think this tip is huge. Eat more
Yeah.
and you will be less sleepy in the first
Yeah.
place. Could be,
Yeah.
a part of your answer.
So you actually, perfect segue into my next common cause of fatigue, which is dysregulated cortisol.
Great.
Cortisol, for anybody who doesn't know, is a stress hormone. So that's the hormone that is responsible for your stress response. But the other thing that it is cortisol and melatonin, which is your sleep hormone. Those two things regulate your circadian rhythm, which is
Mm-hmm.
your sleep cycle. So if you're not sleeping appropriately and you're doing, too much computer work late at night, like all of those things cause dysregulation in cortisol. So sleep is huge. And making sure that you are sleeping when you're supposed to be sleeping and awake when you're supposed to be awake is also huge. I worked a night shift for like 2 years, and it took me so long to get out of that ugly cycle of, not being able to sleep. I wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning and I can't go back to sleep because my body thinks that it's supposed to be awake, but it's dark outside. So that's really rough. Anybody who does shift work, if you do shift work, you've got to do all of the other healthy things in order to kind of minimize the effect that has on your body. Because I get that that's a real thing that people have to do. I've done it, I know. But cortisol, so stress response, and this kind of ties into, so that's the second one. The third one is actually stress in general. Um, and that's mental, emotional, or physical stress. Your body does not know the difference between any of those kinds of stress, right? It responds on a physiologic level the same, whether you're exercising, whether your boss is stressing you out, whether you have a, stressful relationship. Those all happen physiologically inside your body. It's all the same. So I know that we're told that exercise is good stress, and that's true to a certain extent as far as it's good for your cardiovascular system, it's good for your muscles, it's good for your brain because you feel stress relief when you exercise. Some people do. I know not everybody loves to exercise. Um,
Sometimes it's
but
stressful to exercise, but I get it.
exactly, exactly. But it does physiologically have the same effect as that mental and that emotional stress. So my recommendation is always for people, if you like exercising or that is something that you want to be doing, like I purposefully put myself through a lot of physical stress in order to do the things that I like to do. But that means that managing that mental and emotional stress becomes infinitely more important because your body does tolerate a certain amount of stress, but after you kind of tip over that line, it's too much. So if you're not managing if you want the physical stress in your life in the form of exercise and you're not managing the other parts, it's going to be too much and something's going to give. You're going to end up with dysregulated cortisol and you're going to be really tired. So it's really important to just keep that in mind, that it's kind of like an overall, it's kind of the same with like your toxic load. Like it's an overall big picture, right? So you want to manage the things that you can manage in order to do the parts that you want to do.
I think
So
of this
that's
like saying of like everything in moderation, basically. There's a yin and yang to everything. So if you're pushing,
exactly.
then you've got to rest. If you like, there's always equal and opposite response. So this kind of fits
Exactly.
in with, and I mean, it doesn't mean that everything in our life every day is perfectly balanced, but I think it does go to
Correct.
show that if you're going to go at a time of extra stress in your life, then you're going to make sure you're going to give yourself a chunk of time to swing the pendulum back that way and focus in the other direction for a bit to,
Absolutely.
help guide things along. I love
Absolutely.
that.
And yeah, and I think that like anybody who has a chronic illness, if you're having some sort of flare or something like that, those are not the times to try to exercise because
Yeah.
that also cause that physical stress of illness also causes mental and emotional stress. So it just becomes, like you said, it's trying to balance all of that out. And I'm pretty sure that most people know when when too much is too much, right? Like that, and you kind of start to feel like things are out of control. And that's I don't like to talk about stress management with people. I talk about it as increasing your resilience, right? So we're
I love that. I was
never,
just going to say, what do you do if you have a lot of
yeah,
stress, but you can't really see your way out of it? You can't see that changing.
yeah. So we're never going to get rid of stress, right? Like stress is
Right.
a part of life. Like we need that. We have that. There's no way to get rid of it.
Mhm.
But what we can do is we can work to reframe some of the things, the way that we respond to some of the things that we perceive as stressful. So is sitting in traffic stressful? Not really. I mean, you're sitting in your car, right? Like you're just sitting in your car. There's nothing bad is happening to you. You might be late, but and there's nothing you can do about that now. Like literally there's nothing you can do to change that. So rather than getting completely frustrated and stressed out, you just gotta roll with it. And this is where I really think that oils come in super handy. So anything that you can do to bring that mental stress level down, and doing things that like yoga, meditation, journaling, not while you're in the car in traffic, obviously, but when you're at home, doing those kinds of things that really strengthen that mind-body connection really help you to just reframe these situations as, is anything bad going to happen to me because I'm sitting in this traffic? Like what is the worst that could happen here? I'm going to be late. Somebody's going to be mad at me. But honestly, like that's not that big of a deal. It's just not that big of a deal. So trying to find a way to reframe that. Sometimes I do play the what's the worst that could happen game just to like get myself out of that cycle. And I kind of recommend that other people do that too, because we perceive it's all created. Like we've just created this situation. None of it really is you create your own reality.
Yeah.
So
It's a story
if
that we
you
choose to believe. Yeah.
exactly, yeah. So if you're playing this worst that could happen game while you're sitting in traffic, like you'll see that really the only thing that's gonna, I mean, maybe the worst thing that happens is you get fired from your job, which is not great, but like you'll go out and find another job. I mean, in all honesty, nobody's gonna die from you sitting in traffic. Your kid picking up your kid from daycare, same situation. Like nobody's gonna leave your child there. You might have to pay extra money or whatever, but you have created this stress internally, and it's important to recognize that and understand how to reframe that.
Love that. I
So
call it fear setting actually, but it's that same idea.
yeah,
Look at what's the worst case scenario, and then you can let yourself go, okay, now that I can accept the worst case scenario and just know that that's a possibility and I will live, what is the best case scenario out of
right,
this? And that's another
yeah,
option. And then zoning in on, that could happen too. That might feel better.
absolutely,
Focus
absolutely, yeah. So I just think that that's really important to just work on reframing the way that you respond to that, because that's so huge. And this plays into adrenal fatigue, which we'll talk about a little bit later, obviously, but like you can't heal your adrenals without managing stress. So stress is such a big deal. It's such a big deal. And I don't think we give it enough credit. I don't think it really deserves credit, but like we don't recognize it enough. We want diets and pills and oils or whatever to like get rid of the stress, but really you have to address it internally yourself. It's work you have to do,
Yeah,
which
and
is uncomfortable.
I was gonna say too, like my belief is actually that everything stems from stress and inflammation. Like when we look at what causes the physical ailments, the emotional ailments, the
Hmm.
things that we go through, there's a lot of stuff happening in life. But ultimately, if we can break it down to our stress and the inflammation, that's what builds up over time to create these chronic illnesses in my mind, and to
Yep.
create, chronic emotional stress, chronic whatever that is developing. So when you're taking, small proactive steps in daily habits, like you talk about, the fear setting could be a really awesome thing to throw out in the car. I mean, the oils I love in the car because they're so easy to just have with you by your side, as opposed to
Yeah.
breaking out in like downward dog. You can
Yeah.
throw up an oil and just smell some peace, smell
Yep.
some serenity,
Yep.
and start to help a chemical reaction shift that can allow you to start to change your tone of thoughts. And, you can create anchors with that too in that way.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
that can be really powerful. But I love that. And I think that when we look at the root cause, kind of basing on those two things, if we're always proactively trying to navigate through that to help ourselves, then, we're going to be on a better path to our wellness capacity. Especially when
Absolutely.
we don't have our practitioner support or understanding necessarily. These are tools that we have control over in the meantime, while maybe we're digging for more solutions and answers.
Mhm.
And of course, like you said, there's times for them to meld together as necessary. So we were going to kind of go rolling into talking about the thyroid and adrenals, I think. So how would someone get tested to figure out if one of those things is a cause for their fatigue, and
Yeah.
kind of where you wanted to head with that?
So, thyroid, thyroid and adrenals are usually, I mean, again, like it's not usually just your thyroid or just your adrenal. So testing for those things can be tricky, and it's really, really, some of these things are really tricky if you don't have the support of your healthcare practitioner, right? So that can be hard.
Yeah, I actually have a question for you.
Yeah,
So
go for
my
it.
mom personally suffered a long time with a lot of stress and adrenal fatigue, and she ended up having a thyroid issue.
Mhm.
Um, but she was telling me something about you have to specifically ask to get your T4 tested, or was it T2? There's some
Yeah,
like special thing that doesn't happen automatically that you have to specifically ask to have checked that costs a little bit more money. But that
right.
was when she realized there were big problems, and other people who she's helped who've had issues, that when they ask for that test, that's when they finally see that there is an issue there where it wasn't showing up in the general test. Do you have any insight
Yeah.
into this, or?
Yeah, so typically healthcare providers test what's called your TSH when they're looking at your thyroid. And that's something that kind of is a standard lab test. And that actually, it's your thyroid stimulating hormone. So that tests that's the hormone that tells your thyroid to do its job.
Mhm.
So it's actually a test of how well your brain and your thyroid are talking. It really actually has nothing to do with your thyroid in and of itself.
Okay.
So that is a really terrible test as far as like actually figuring out what's wrong with your thyroid.
Okay.
So most practitioners won't test if you ask for a full panel, like a full thyroid panel. A lot of times you kind of get this, well, no, like that's not helpful. Your TSH is fine, which is, I think in general, people are coming around to this a little bit more. Unfortunately, it often comes after you've like been chipping away at some sort of issue for a long time and they're finally like, okay, fine, we'll test the rest of your thyroid, which I think is, I mean, that's terrible. But so
Mhm.
if you feel like you want your thyroid tested and you have a practitioner that is not supportive, number one, I say find a new practitioner. And I don't say that lightly because I understand how hard it is to find a healthcare provider that you trust. Whether you're working with somebody in person, one on one, or online, there are plenty of people and plenty of options. Like I can order lab tests for people in almost every state in the US. There's like four exceptions to that. And so I can order lab tests. Somebody can go get them. They don't bill. The company that I use doesn't bill insurance directly, but you can submit it to your insurance to get reimbursed.
Right.
So that's an option. If you're like, I just need these tested and my doctor won't do it, which I think I mean, you pay your doctor. Why won't they do the things that you want them to do? Like, I don't understand that. Um, so again, I don't say that lightly, but if you're not getting what you need from your healthcare provider, find a new one. And again, whether that's like a health coach, somebody like me that sees, that is a practitioner, but I see people online as well as in person, find somebody that you trust and that you can work with and that will work with you because you're never going to get anywhere. You care about your health. The other person, in theory, should at least care that you are taken care of and that you're getting what you need. Nobody will care about your health as much as you, but you should have somebody that you work with that is at least willing to listen to you and help you get the things that you need.
Mhm.
So full thyroid panel involves a TSH. So your thyroid has two forms of hormone. So your thyroid stimulating hormone tells your thyroid to make hormone. It makes a hormone called T4, which is an inactive form of thyroid hormone, and then it converts it into T3, which is the active form of thyroid hormone. So I test TSH because it is a useful piece of information in the context of all the other things. It's not useful by itself. Sometimes it can be, but that's not the only place for things to go wrong. TSH, T4, so a free T4, a free T3, something called your reverse T3, which is actually the thing that like puts the brakes on your thyroid. So that says like, well, we've got enough. So sometimes you can have really elevated T3, I'm sorry, reverse T3, but normal other thyroid hormones. But that means that your thyroid is producing enough hormone, but it's not getting where it needs to go because the brakes are being pumped. So it's not getting into your cells. So
Okay.
there's a lot of places for this process to break down. And if you're only looking at one tiny piece of it, you're not getting the full story.
Right.
So if you can get a full thyroid panel, and I usually test thyroid antibodies on people at least once because that is, so Hashimoto's thyroiditis, which is the autoimmune form of hypothyroidism, is it's speculated that it's up to 95% of all cases of hypothyroidism. So that's something, that's an important piece to have too. And the tricky thing about thyroid is, I think it's almost 30 million Americans have thyroid disease, but over 50% of those are either misdiagnosed or undiagnosed. So that's kind of a big deal. But
Yeah,
it's because it's so hard to get the right testing.
fascinating. This is really helpful.
Yeah,
I'm so excited for the people that are, hearing this news, and it also in my own family hearing this story and knowing that
yeah,
my own mother's like, you need to get your thyroid tested. It runs with so this
yeah.
is
No, that's
so
important.
yeah, for a lot of people to
Yeah.
understand the details of
And
these tests and what to look for.
yeah, and it's not straightforward, unfortunately. The other thing that I wanted to say about thyroid is it's important to understand that just because somebody has tested your thyroid and told you that they're within normal, like all of these tests are within the range, still doesn't mean that you're okay because there's a very different, it's very different. Normal ranges and optimal ranges are actually very different when it comes to thyroid. So the way that thyroid lab ranges were determined was a huge study that was done where they eliminated everybody who they knew had thyroid disease. But if 50% of people who have thyroid disease are undiagnosed or misdiagnosed, and they've tested all these people and used the averages of all of those numbers, you've got lab ranges of people that include people that have thyroid disease. So it's not really a very good
Oh,
measure. So there is more research being done on, and there is kind of this like optimal range that a lot of functional practitioners operate in, and that seems to get really good results. But that just because you're normal doesn't mean that you're actually like good. So that's important. Working with somebody who understands that difference is important too.
right, because each
And
body is
then,
unique as well, and kind of
yeah,
honoring how a
and then
person is
it's
telling you how they feel to know that maybe something is off. Okay.
right. Yeah, and then as far as adrenals go, that's also kind of tricky, but in a totally different way. If you go to your conventional
Great.
medical practitioner, they're not going to test your adrenals. They're going to, they don't believe, most of them don't believe in adrenal fatigue, which, whatever. Like, I'm not here to judge them. But they're going to kind of be like, yeah, you're fine. But if you work with a more functional or holistic practitioner, most of them test adrenals, cortisol. So cortisol is a good measure of how your adrenals are functioning. That test is typically done using saliva, which is an okay test, because what you want is the pattern. You want to see the pattern. It peaks early in the day and then it sort of slopes off, which is the exact opposite of what your melatonin does, because remember, that's your circadian rhythm. So it
Right.
peaks early in the day, so you're awake, and then you slowly are working towards going to bed at the end of the day. So the saliva test does give you your pattern, which is helpful, but the problem is that only 5% of your free cortisol shows up in your saliva. So it gives you an accurate representation of the pattern, but what it doesn't do is tell you whether you have high or low cortisol or whether it's normal. So because it's only 5% of your total cortisol. I've started using something called the Dutch test, which is, I think it stands for, I keep forgetting to look this up again. It's dried urine complete hormone testing. And it's like kind of like a little pregnancy test. You get 5 little strips of paper that you pee on and let it dry. And then you send it to the lab and they analyze it. And that gives you your cortisol pattern, but it's a better representation of the overall cortisol that's in your body too. So they give you the pattern and they also give you the amount that you have, so you know whether it's high or low, or normal. So you can have an abnormal pattern, but you can have normal amounts of cortisol, which is where this gets really clear as mud. Um, but what the Dutch test also does is it tells you your other hormones. So it talks about your estrogen, your progesterone, your DHEA. It talks about a couple of metabolites of vitamins, which is a huge thing, and a few neurotransmitters. So it gives you a really solid picture of everything that's going on in your body on a hormonal level, which can be really helpful in figuring out what actually is happening. Because and cortisol is responsible. There's a tie-in between cortisol and thyroid hormone. So I can't remember which direction it goes, but too much cortisol suppresses something. So you can actually figure out if your cortisol is out of whack. You can actually also then correlate that back to a thyroid, which can be helpful. So it's not black and white, unfortunately.
So
And
would you say, sorry,
Go ahead.
I was going to say, would you say though, like, because women's hormone regulation seems to be a big topic of conversation in women's health in general. And so people are looking at their hormone management, but then we're talking about, I mean, cortisol is a part of that, but the adrenal fatigue and the thyroid is all within that. Would you say that those are the two factors really to look at most when people are feeling they have hormonal imbalance? Or, yeah, I guess like what comes first, the chicken or the egg? Like, is it, could it be
Yeah,
a
it's
variety of
tricky.
things?
Yeah, it's tricky, and that's why I like the Dutch test because it gives you everything. Like another really common thing in women is low progesterone. So you get estrogen dominance from you can have estrogen dominance from either not having from having you can have low estrogen and low progesterone and still have too much estrogen because they're out of balance. So
Right.
low progesterone is like a huge deal in most people. And actually, me personally, I did a Dutch test because I was curious and I thought that my cortisol was going to be completely out of whack because that's the way that I feel. And I exercise a lot. I was sure that my cortisol was going to be totally off the charts. It was normal. It was completely normal. But my estrogen and my progesterone were like, I have none of either one of them, but I have even less progesterone than I do estrogen, along with a couple of other things. Basically, I have the hormones of like a 16-year-old boy, which was really not what I was expecting at all. um, but I told my boyfriend, I was like, this is interesting. Like, I don't know what's going on here, but um,
That is
so
funny. So when it comes to looking at the estrogen levels, would you say something like we in doTERRA offer something called phytoestrogen? It helps get rid of
mhm,
xenoestrogens, the bad estrogens mimicked in our
yeah.
environment, and trying to help the body regulate. Would you say something like that is a helpful tool in that case?
Yeah, I've had a lot of people have really good luck with that. I kind of go back and forth between like testing and not testing. I feel like if somebody has, classic symptoms of something, it's not necessarily, and the solution is going to be something like, a more natural solution. I don't feel like testing is critical unless we try it and it doesn't work. And then we're like, okay, what are we really dealing with here? But then sometimes I'm like, no, we should just test this stuff to find out. So yes, I definitely think that that is a great product. And I have several people, especially women, who have already gone through menopause. They've had really good luck with that, which seems to be, because all hormones after menopause basically are non-existent, but that really helps calm that estrogen dominance because you get, xenoestrogens from so many other places, that seems to really help with that.
Okay, a couple of thoughts I have that I want to ask
Yeah.
is I would love to go over what your top natural solutions would be
Yeah.
in general for people who may be experiencing some of this and perhaps before they take the step to Western medicine or if they've been struggling finding answers, what are things they could do now to see if they notice a shift in a positive way? And at what
Absolutely.
point do they need to have medical intervention? At what point would you say, enough is enough and we've got to
Yeah.
have extra help here?
That's a great question. So my top natural solutions are, and so one of the really common causes of fatigue is actually vitamin deficiencies too. And
Don't even
so,
get me started.
right, 'cause we're not eating enough food, and then we're not eating the right foods, and then our bodies are, our digestive systems are all messed up, and we're not getting the nutrients that we need from the food that we're eating. So
I
I
know. Have
would
you seen
say
the documentary Food for Change and Food Matters talking about
I
how
haven't
like
yet. It's on my list.
the minerals aren't in the
Yeah,
soil anymore, and then it takes I don't know how many tomatoes now to get the nutrition you used to get from
right,
one. So when you're trying to eat the right foods, you're still not able to do that because our environment has changed so much in the way we produce food, and we're not getting
yeah,
it vine ripened off the leaf to have the live digestive enzymes in it for us to help our body process it properly with
right,
those live
right.
digestive enzymes. We're getting metabolic enzymes turning into digestive enzymes to like compensate, and it's creating this like North American chronic issue. And I'm so like, let me go up. I don't know if you've used the Lifelong Vitality Pack yourself, but honestly, for
That's
me, that has been
yeah.
like such a foundation to my overall wellness. And I can supplement things in with oils, but I noticed a shift in cravings.
Hmm.
I noticed a shift in my energy, in my mood,
Hmm.
in my cycle. Like, and I actually had no knee problems. I have had 3 knee surgeries. I noticed a
Hmm.
huge shift with pain management. Like I was
Yeah.
like, what is this in my life?
Yeah. So
So
that's
anyway,
actually one, yeah, that's actually one of my top favorite products that I mean, a
so
good
glad to hear that because
a good multivitamin is important in general. And so I work with patients who are not necessarily open to using doTERRA products. So I'm not great at recommending other things in that respect because I just haven't found one that's that good. So,
you should
it's a
feel
whole,
different. I don't think people
yeah,
do the test of like you take vitamins because you think you're supposed to and you're told to do these
right.
things. But
Right.
sometimes if there are more synthetics in your system, it's actually causing more stress in your system to try and
Exactly.
navigate that and see if there's anything good that it can take out of it versus
Exactly.
being more bioavailable, being more whole food based, being something that's really fulfilling those micronutrients within your cells. I mean,
Hmm.
it's me all jazzed up.
I love it. I love it. Um, so touching on that, so like lifelong vitality is definitely a foundation. Like a healthy diet, obviously, that's important.
Yeah.
Lifelong vitality. So one of the things, this is all kind of tied together to make this a big muddy answer to your question. Gut health, working on your gut health is really important. If you don't have the support of your practitioner, working on your gut health is really important because leaky gut is essentially like the thing that causes all of these other things to happen. Inflammation, all of that can be tied back to leaky gut. Autoimmune disease can be tied back to leaky gut.
And
So
what
if
would
you're
cause
struggling with cause leaky gut,
that? Hmm.
yeah, damage to your intestinal lining. So, and that's from eating foods that you are sensitive to. It's from eating foods that are known gut irritants, stress, anything like that. And you don't have to have digestive upset in order to have leaky gut. That's the thing that people don't seem to understand. They're like, oh, I have my digestive system is fine. But if you're struggling with fatigue, if you're struggling with any autoimmune disease, if you're struggling with any sort of chronic health issue, you probably have leaky gut. I think most of America has leaky gut. Um, so making sure that you address that is important. And that means eating the foods that make you feel good and being really, really honest with yourself about what those are. And I don't mean feel good as in like you got a
Are there
big dopamine
general
hit.
are there general recommendations for what foods should feel good for people? I realize each person is unique and individual, but would you kind of have a suggestion for where people should
Yeah.
focus?
So it's definitely starting with the base of like whole nutrient dense foods. So I really like a whole 30 as like a kind of a way for people to learn how to understand which foods make them feel good and which foods don't, because it eliminates most of the common causes or the common like gut irritants and things that cause issues for people. I don't like food sensitivity testing. If anybody wants to hear me rant about that, I have a podcast. I have a podcast episode about why I don't like food sensitivity
Okay.
testing. But so focusing on, good quality sources of protein, meat, fish, seafood, all that kind of stuff. Um, Lots of fruits and vegetables, and then your healthy fats. That's the base, right? So and then the problem is within those foods, there can often be foods that people don't tolerate well. But until you get rid of all of the other junk, it's hard to know. So, and some people say, oh, well, I don't have a problem with dairy, but they don't realize that how crummy they feel when they eat it until they get rid of it for a couple of weeks and then try it again. And then they realize how bad they felt. So I'm actually a huge advocate for testing most foods that way. And once you get rid of the majority of the junk, and I use junk as like all the things that you shouldn't eat, um, once you get rid of a majority of that, you'll really be able to tell when you eat something and it doesn't agree with you, whether you get really tired, whether you do get some sort of digestive upset, bloating, gas, burping after meals, any sort of like change in your stool, skin issues like breakouts, eczema, anything like that is a huge indicator that you have some sort of sensitivity to something that you ate. Most people can actually figure it out. I've gotten pretty good at figuring it out. People don't want to do the work, so sometimes when they're like, I don't know what it is, it's really just a matter of you haven't been paying attention. Which again, I like a whole 30 because it really focuses on those whole nutrient dense foods. And I'm not paid to say that. It's just an easy resource to give people because there's so much information out there about it.
Mhm.
Um, focus on those whole foods for a while, and then you start testing some of that other stuff. So
So
that I like as go ahead.
I was just going to say, so if you find yourself in a position where you're going to eat the food you shouldn't eat, I have some tools that I like to use personally, but I would love to
Yeah.
hear kind of like if you're going to do it.
Yeah. Well, so
You know,
before I talk about if you're going to do it, I definitely think that in order to help heal your gut and make sure that you're getting the nutrients that you need out of the food that you're eating, I recommend everybody take a probiotic. Love PB Assist, one of my favorite probiotics ever, and a digestive enzyme. And I do love the Terrazyme. I use that all the time. I have like bottles of it stocked up in my
we
house.
have that in our house too, 100%. And the is so one thing that I love about the PB Assist is that what I understand is a lot of probiotics get eaten up in your stomach acid because they don't have the protective barrier to actually
Yes,
make it into your intestine. So is that kind
correct.
of one of the
That is
factors?
that is my understanding as well. And even just from personal experience, I notice a difference when I use PB Assist versus when I use a different probiotic. So And that's not to say that everybody wouldn't, somebody wouldn't be able to have a benefit from a different probiotic. But I personally notice a difference between, I've tested a lot of them and I haven't found one that I think that works quite as well as that. Just, less digestive issues with food in general. And then, so I recommend that everybody take those, anybody who has any sort of health issue that they're working on, I recommend digestive enzyme and probiotic at least twice a day. So with your morning meal and with your evening meal. And
Yeah,
that
we
can
have a
really help
Terrazyme
get,
with every meal, but we have rules where it's like if it's a good for you food, like what we think it is, we'll take one.
yeah,
If it's maybe
yeah,
not so great, two, and if we know we're going for like fast food, three. Three with
yeah,
that
no,
meal. Maybe a
and I think
digestive
that's
pill with
great.
it.
Yeah, I think that's great. Because that helps you, not only are you like making the choice, right? You've made the choice, but you're
Yeah, we
also
know what
trying
we're
to
doing
minimize.
but we're just like, okay,
Exactly.
we're gonna do it. So how do we make this less painful?
Exactly. And I think that's great. Most people only need one digestive enzyme in general to like make it through, to get the most out of a meal. But if you're doing something that's going to, that the food doesn't agree with you, or if you eat something and you're like, gosh, why do I feel so terrible? Take another one, and see if that helps. And I've had really good luck with that, with people as well. And actually, another thing that I've used, is the GX Assist. And I've used that kind of as as a like, if you eat something, because what's happening is the bacteria in your gut is fermenting the things the bad bacteria in your gut is fermenting the things that are that you're eating, and it's causing gas and bloating. And those are not necessarily easy things to determine all the time. Like there are vegetables that are commonly the cause of, like Brussels sprouts are something that some bacteria that are not necessarily beneficial really like. So using just one GX Assist, found also has pretty good results because it just like knocks down, it kind of kills out that bacteria, knocks down that bloating pretty quickly.
I've not
And
heard that before. That's a great tip. Thanks.
yeah, it works pretty well. And I've actually noticed personally, like over time, as I've used that technique, I've had fewer issues. And definitely, like, you don't want to use it constantly. I think on the bottle, if you're using it daily, it says 10 days. I personally have used it more than that, but I wouldn't recommend that anybody else use it more than that, because it is pretty powerful stuff.
So would you be balancing that out with probiotics at the same time, or you would be taking that for a few days and then probiotics after?
So I would take it, you want to separate probiotics by at least an hour or two. So you can take them in the same day.
Okay.
So like you eat your meal with your digestive enzyme and your probiotic, and you're like an hour or two later, you're like, I still just don't feel so great. Take a GX Assist and then see if that helps. Um, but yeah, you definitely want to not take probiotics at least, I think it's an hour. I think it's an hour after, before or after taking that, because it will kill the probiotic.
Right. Good. So we were discussing your top natural solutions and then when Western medicine is kind of needed. We kind of went off on a lovely tangent, which I'm grateful we
Yeah.
did. But I want to
Yeah.
make sure that
So
we give people that information too.
yeah. So top natural solutions, like I said, LLV, digestive enzymes, probiotics, definitely making sure that you're eating foods that make you feel good. And that, I think that with, digestive health is really important. Um, Stress relief is huge. I've mentioned it once and I'm going to mention it again, because if you're not addressing that, then nothing is ever going to get better, honestly. So you need to make sure that you are keeping an eye on that. I also really like, as far as thyroid goes, like thyroid support, there's not a lot of good actual evidence for any essential oils that support thyroid. But since your adrenals are tied so closely to your thyroid, anything that supports adrenals also supports thyroid. So any of your calming, grounding oils is going to be really important for that. Those are great, like we talked about already, tools for stress relief. Anytime you're feeling like you need just to bring it back around, a grounding oil. I like all the tree oils for that. That's my personal favorite. Um, those are really great solutions there. And then specifically for your adrenal health, basil is a really good oil for adrenal health. So using a drop of basil with some fractionated coconut oil and actually applying it directly over your adrenals, which if anybody doesn't know where those are, they are on top of your kidneys. So they're on your kind of your lower back. And that seems to be really great for people. And then I do love Clary Calm for hormone support,
Yeah.
just in general. I find that to be really helpful, especially managing PMS symptoms, which again, that's a whole nother a whole nother issue.
Yeah, that was a conversation. I found
Yeah,
personally the Life and Vitality Pack has made a positive shift for me, but I will around that time of the month.
absolutely.
I actually like to use it as a deoderant.
Oh, I like that.
So
Yeah,
I put it under my, like, I'm like, it's doing good for my body. It smells good and,
right.
you know,
Yeah,
and it's doing all those things. So I kind of rotate between different oils in that regard and
yeah, I like it.
the nose being absorbed in either way. So
Right, exactly. But yeah, so those are my big things. And I also, to answer your question about when somebody really does need to get help, if you are, I mean, again, that's kind of individual. Obviously, like if you are just not able to do the things that you want to do and you can't, if you ever feel like something's not right and you can't dig yourself out of this hole, like get help. I mean, I would argue that getting help sooner, again, getting help from a conventional medical doctor may not be as helpful. However, they can do some lab testing to find out if something else is really wrong with you, right? Like, so sometimes you don't want to be the person that has, you know, terrible cancer and you're thinking like, gosh, I'm just so tired all the time, right? Like, and you didn't go get help. And I don't say that to scare people, but I say that because I think a lot of times we're afraid to go get help from our healthcare providers, which number one is why having a healthcare provider that you trust and that is willing to work with you and that is open to, you know, hearing what you have to say about your body and the way that you're treating your body is important. But at the end of the day, it's important to get some of those baseline tests done or to at least check in with your healthcare provider because they can see things maybe that you can't. So if you're coming to them and saying, you know, you have XYZ complaints and they rule out all of the things that they know could be a problem, that is also very important because you don't want it to get to the point where it's too late to get help or it's too, you know, if you had gotten help 6 months ago, there would have been something you could have done about it. And now, you know, you're trying to play catch up. So I would say that getting help sooner as opposed to later is important, but I know that that's really hard just because of the way that a lot of people are kind of, you know, let down by the conventional medical model.
what I think is really exciting about what doTERRA is creating, though, is that this combining of the two worlds and having the doctor symposium and you know, more nurses joining on, learning about the oils, having them in hospitals and clinics, and the fact that they're making these integrated clinics to me is the future of healthcare. It's this revolution
Yeah.
that's needed so that we can combine natural solutions with Western medicine so that when somebody comes in and they have a problem, they are actually offered that root cause whole you health support so that
Mm-hmm.
it's, you know, not just going to be covering up a symptom with something, creating something else. For example, not always the case,
Right.
but you know, that sort of mentality one might have, some of those commercials you've seen online, being able to have the choice of what feels right for them as a place to start and really understanding fully what the issue is. And even having counseling as a part of that model and nutritional support. Like I'm so excited for the future of where we're heading to really help people take, like, have the empowerment, I guess. We're not all medical doctors. We don't all have this background that you have
Right.
that we're, you know, feeding off
Right.
of, but having the trust and the support to know all the options, to know what can support you in what ways, and to be educated when you are facing something so that you can make the best decision for how you feel, you know, in that space. So I think what's
Absolutely.
exciting is that although there are so many practitioners to come around, there are a lot who do acknowledge now and who see the two combining together and being effective for people. So that's exciting. And thank goodness you're one of them, right?
Yeah. And I think to kind of play off of what you said, I also think that it's really important that when you go to a healthcare provider and they give you treatment options or solutions, I think it's important for you to, I mean, this is something that I do with my patients, and I know that it's not necessarily common for other people to do this, but it's important for you to understand that they're making a recommendation based on the things that you have said, and what they can't necessarily do is make that decision for you. So I often will present to my patients, you know, these are our two options. Here's why this one is a good idea, and here's why this one may not be a good idea as well, and here's why this one is a good idea. Which one feels better for you? Because, you know, I don't know your unique situation. I don't know what's right for your family. I don't know what's right, you know, what feels right for you. So when your doctor says, hey, I think you should go on blood pressure medication, you know, you need to talk to them about why, you know, why they think that's important for you. And it's, you know, the answer of like, because it's what the standard of care says, it's not a good answer. like, sure, you should be on blood pressure medication if your blood pressure is high, but like, let's talk about what else you need to be doing. Let's talk about how we can get you off of this medication eventually, because the reality is like high blood pressure is an issue and it can kill you. So, if you can't manage it on your own with whatever you're doing, but maybe you don't know what you can do to manage it. And maybe that option to take medication doesn't feel right to you, but you need to be able to verbalize that to your healthcare provider, and they need to be able to verbalize to you why they do or don't think it's a good idea, not just like, here's what you need to do. That's not the right way that's not practicing medicine. That's like telling people what to do.
And I
It's
think too, like,
it's bossing people around.
yeah, and when you need to take these options, if you're in a situation that's kind of in an intense mode, I'm like, okay, we're going to start here, but if I don't want to
Right.
stay here, how do can we work together? Can I try natural solutions, and can we check my levels and see if there's shifts, and maybe I can work my way out of this, and having that kind of a relationship so that it really is working together for your best health versus here's a bottle of pills, go away, and you're
Right.
done.
Right.
That
Yeah.
is, yeah, a different
And I
sensation.
think
So,
I think it's hard for people or hard for physicians in general, because not everybody is as motivated as this community is, right? Like, not everybody, there's such a huge population of people out there that all they want is a pill. They don't care about doing anything else, and give me more pills, that's going to solve all of my problems. So unfortunately for healthcare practitioners, like, they get the person who's like, I want to do something else, and they don't know what to do with them because they're not in the majority. Hopefully that will
right.
change, but I think it's hard for them as well. And that's not a good reason to just throw pills at people, but so many people are not open to that discussion that I think it makes it hard to balance that discussion. I'm in a unique position where all of my patients are coming to me because that's what they want. They want this other approach, which makes me very happy. And I'm more than happy to, like, I love doing that. That's why I do what I do.
Right.
But I do know that not everybody, when you go to your physician and they're like, oh, here's, pills, your blood pressure's high, whatever, like, they're coming at that from a place of, they've had 50 patients before you who all they wanted was blood pressure medication, and the patients aren't willing to do any work. So it's unfortunate, but that's kind of the reality.
I know the way that I think of this lifestyle too, and it is a lifestyle choice that people are doing. I think sometimes people come and I don't know what their thought is, like, oh, these oils smell pretty, or maybe I'll take one and it's going to be like a pill, but it's not. I think of it as, it's not food because it's not nutrition, but I think of it as
Right.
food because you need to take it like food. If it's of nature and
Right.
feeding your body in that same regard, and responding like the way food is for us, processing through, then it's like, well, maybe you can even pair it with breakfast. I do these oils. With lunch, I do these oils. With dinner, I do these oils or these protocols. And then it's just about incorporating it into a routine that you kind of have to do anyways. Because if you were to eat one big meal a day, it wouldn't really do so well for you. And I have the same wonder about medication when there's like that
Right.
one you take for the whole day. Like, how does that work? And is that
Right.
really
Well, and that's some of the problems with people taking vitamins in general, is like calcium. There's some interesting studies about calcium and how taking a calcium supplement actually might increase your cardiovascular risk, because if you're getting it from food, like, you're getting a little bit throughout the day, but whereas you're taking, 1,200 milligrams of calcium and you're just like throwing it all into your system, and your body's like, what do I do with this? And it like shoves it anywhere that it can, and it ends up in your blood vessels, and you end up with, clogged arteries. Like, that's
and
not
that's the
really
same thing with
helpful.
the same thing with superfoods. Sometimes people
Right.
will like use that as a magic pill, like a magic
Hmm.
little source on a vitamin, and it might be such a little amount that it does nothing for you, but it's just this
Right.
fairy dust, this is good for you. Or it's to the extreme, and too much of anything. We talked about moderation. It's finding the
Hmm.
balance. And what I think is so powerful to me about the Lifelong Vitality Pack is when you look at it, there are some therapeutic amounts of things, but it is in a way, like, you take them over the course of the day, and it is in a way to help it be bioavailable and of nature to your body. So
Absolutely.
yeah, and I mean, even with calcium itself, you have to take it with bioflavonoids in order for it to really be consumed in the system. And I think about some of the vitamins, and iron is the same way. It doesn't just get absorbed with that. So when you're taking things out of their natural state with all the compounds that are naturally understood by our body, then it's a hard game. And then you're still fighting that game of trying to help or harm, even though it's something good or natural. It's not in
Right.
its full state. So anyways, that's love it, love it, love this conversation. This is wonderful. So we have about 2 minutes or 1 minute left, really, to kind of wrap
Oh,
things
gosh.
up. If you were to say your last final words, and then I would just love to say something at the end there, and we
Yeah.
can.
No, if I had anything to share with people in general that I wanted you to take away from this, it's that you're not alone and you're not crazy. If you feel like something is not right with your body, it probably isn't. And it unfortunately falls on you to find somebody to help you if you're not able to help yourself, which most of us can't get quite all of the things that we need on our own, unfortunately. Like we just need that little bit of help from a practitioner. So I do encourage you to take the time to find a practitioner that will listen to you and that will work with you and give you the things that you need, because that is so important. But also know that you are not alone in this journey and this process.
And if people want to reach you, they can connect with you. You have a page yourself on Facebook. It's Martha Florence FNP that they can search for you. Then they can also connect with you for any kind of added support that way too. Is that correct?
Absolutely. Yep. And then I just have I'll just throw the link for the little freebie that I have for everybody in the chat here, and maybe you can post it into the Facebook group.
Definitely. So what I plan to do actually is in the post, you talked about something you were going to say about food sensitivities. I'm wondering if I can share that podcast link in the post itself. I can edit it, and then we can add in the link to kind of have some connections for people to move forward from. So that's great. People aren't going to see what is in our little private chat here.
Okay. Yeah. You'll have to post that in the, Let me find the link for the podcast so you can have that too.
Perfect. And then I just wanted to, I wanted to thank you very, very much for having this conversation with me today. I think it's going to serve so many, and your voice is needed and welcomed in this environment where I think a lot of people are starting to face these issues and these challenges, and they don't know where to turn to or how to not feel like they're going crazy, or to know that maybe a higher capacity of wellness is actually possible for them. That isn't normal to feel that way. Another thing that I want to mention too is that we also have an immune support kit we can put together, and we love to support you in these natural solutions along with this journey. So if that feels like a fit for you, don't hesitate to reach out to me. And I love partnering and meeting up with people who have these experiences and have the background to help us support the foundation of validation about what we're talking about, and really make sure we're helping people find that solution focus. And whether it's integrated or whether we can do it naturally on its own, every person has their path, but we're just here to go alongside with you. You're not alone. We care.
Totally. Absolutely.
It matters. So wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. Thank you so much for joining us today. And I'm not able to copy these out of this chat box right now, but what I'm going to do is have you message me in our little Facebook chat, and I will edit these into the post itself, and look forward to hearing all the positive results that people are experiencing through our chat today, and what they've learned. And until next time.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Bye for now.